Good morning, everybody. This morning I want to talk a little bit about walking in two worlds. I want to talk about my grandfather for a minute. He was born up at the headwaters of the Susitna River at the turn of the century. And at the turn of the century there was a gold mine there. So he kind of grew up in a gold mine, and my mother was born. And when World War II started, the whole family moved to Cantwell. And then I came along. My grandfather and my father worked for the railroad, and I just assumed I would work for the railroad too. And we had a big house. I shoveled a lot of coal to heat it. I remember as I got older, I will never ever shovel another piece of coal. That's just a side note, but growing up thinking I would work for the railroad, and at the time, Cantwell didn't have a high school, so I had to leave Cantwell to go to high school. Went to high school and on to college. And one day I was going home to Cantwell during like a spring break or something, and it happened. I got a speeding ticket, and it was later on I found out it was with the very first radar unit that the state troopers ever had. So luck would have, and fate would have that. And I think the ticket was $36. And I remember being angry at myself for getting that ticket. And as time progressed, I thought, you know what? I'm a good guy. It's better to give than to receive. And that's how I became a state trooper. Another side note, I can remember the very first time I ever saw a state trooper. Stop and think about that for a second. I was just a small boy in Cantwell, and the highlight of the day was to go meet the train. There was a southbound train, a northbound train, and on one of these trains, a trooper got off. He got off and shook hands with a few people and got back on and left. And my grandmother and I were sitting in the pickup, watching who was coming and going. And I remember her tensing up, and I remember asking her, who was that? And she said, oh, he's the muscle. He's the guy that come and gets you. And so that was my first perception of a state trooper. And then the Parks Highway got built, and then troopers came in, and I became friends with one. He loved to ski. And you remember those old military suicide slabs? Well, that's what we had in school. and later on, I went to work for that guy. And to this day, we're still really good friends. As a state trooper, I found myself walking in two worlds. And most of my career I spent in the fish and game side. And I'll tell you how I got into the fish and game side. As a young man, you want to go fast, lights on, and catch somebody. But I remember my auntie telling me, Gary, there's guys that'll do that. But you grew up in Alaska, you love to hunt, fish. Who speaks for the animals? Who is on the side of the animals? And that's how I got into the fish and wildlife side. And I progressed through my career. Law enforcement is such a big field, you can get specialized in various areas. And being in the wildlife side, I got very good at the fish and game laws. I always didn't agree with them, but it was my duty to uphold them. And when I became commissioner, there were a lot of other laws you had to deal with. And I can remember about a year ago, one of my advisors, we were going before the legislature talking about moving Schedule 3 to Schedule 4 drugs, and I didn't have a clue what that meant. Various drugs fall on different schedules as far as the penalties. And I remember turning to her and saying, you know what, I will never get this in the 5 minutes before the legislature hearing. I'll tell you what, I'll introduce you, you stand and tell what we need changed. And that's when it really became apparent to me that there are lots of laws that we enforce, and I just can't begin to know them all. But in the bottom of my heart, I still know right from wrong. And as this tribal court process begins to build, I am excited. It is an alternative way to help our people. Again, walking in two worlds. So from the bottom of my heart, this department stands with you. I look forward to working with you, and together we can get things done. So thank you.